Hello, I'm Jake Collins, and this is Knightmare Series 5, Episode 12, which was first broadcast on the 22nd of November 1991. Thanks to where temporal disruption fell in the previous episode, there's been a bit of a change in presentation or revelation to the audience at the start of this episode. It's actually Pickle who reveals to us that Elita has lost her voice. As originally planned, going through the gameplay, it's Audrus that reveals that to the team, and he would have revealed it to us too if temporal disruption hadn't come exactly at the point it did. So it's kind of spoiled Audrus's revelation, really, of open wide, say, no, it's no good, you have quite simply lost your voice. I always think, oh yeah, well we weren't supposed to know that was exactly what had happened to Elita when we first heard Audrus say that. Were we? At the end of the previous episode, we're not quite sure exactly what's going on with Audrus and Elita, but we find out when Pickle says there, who's lost her voice, and is all gloating about it. And then when Audrus reveals at this stage to Elita, you have quite simply lost your voice, Pickle reacts like he didn't know that already. Master, if that little cavern brat Elita really has lost her voice. Well, you seem to be quite happy with that fact just now when you were reading out of the Book of Quests. But now that Audrus has revealed it, it's a surprise to you, is it, Pickle? That's one of those things where temporal disruption interferes a bit with the original feel and order of the filming. Reminds me rather of the very end of Alan's quest in Series 6 in that way, making it very obvious that Tregard and Pickle have already filmed their reactions to the quest in progress before coming back and filming the beginning of that particular episode. A little distracting, perhaps. Certainly I did notice these things when I was first watching the show. When I was 8 and 9, in the case of Series 5 and 6, but it didn't bother me, it's just something to spot. The three advisors, Ian, Grant and Richard, have spotted here that Audrus has given them a small spell called Bag. Would you believe me if I told you that Audrus only ever gives out one more spell in Knightmare's entire run? Well, it's true. As I mentioned before, spell giving from characters in particular does get rather thin on the ground as we go through. But were the advisors there really listening to what they were supposed to do with the bag spell? Very clearly, Audrus tells them, it is to capture Elita's lost voice if they should chance to encounter upon it on their travels, or Alex's travels. A nice little concept, really, on Knightmare. A lost voice can literally be lost and wandering around somewhere. Rather fun, but the way this team handles the situation kind of distracts from all the fun and just makes us say, what the heck are you doing? When that bag spell is attempted to be cast for the first time, which is just after this spyglass sequence. It's setting the scene, this spyglass sequence. Skarkill reveals he did have Elita's voice captured, but it kept insulting him. He's got a terrible sensitive nature, and he just had to let it go. I do enjoy Raina Borton as Skarkill, and I always did. I enjoy him as Julius Scaramanga as well. But Skarkill is his character that I do enjoy more overall. So the scene is set there, the voice is out there somewhere for Alex and team to capture, as we may have supposed. But what happens here? A skull ghost turns up, and what immediately does Advisor Ian do? Spellcasting. B-A-G. What a stupid thing to do. What a terrible mistake. And what an absolute piece of asking to be on your very last chance before Tim Child decides to kill you off. They already kind of got let off in level 1. Gwendolyn wanted 2 correct answers for the password. They only gave 1, but that was fair enough. They were trying, and Alex was carrying the green arrow, so Gwendolyn let him have the password. Made a lot of sense, that. But trying to cast the bag spell and the skull goes there. Wow. Unfathomable. A very silly thing to do. Hasn't that advisor been listening? What is that bag spell for? To capture Alita's voice that Lord Fear and Skarkill were just talking about in the spy class. Someone's obviously given him a bit of a talking to between scenes here. Alita's voice turns up. Do you think I should use the bag spell now, Alex? Well, you already used it, didn't you? You tried to, but you were let off that particular mistake. But surely, as a team, you're on your last chance now. Do you notice how the black background of the mouth effect there disappears and you can see the room through it in order for it to go into the bag? Strange little piece of computer idiosyncrasy there that I always notice. But really, these 3 advisors are starting to make themselves look like the 3 silly twerps. When Elita's voice starts insulting Alex in rhyme, they think it's a question or a riddle and start trying to come up with an answer to it. A silly hat and looks ugly. A witch. Alex points out, it's me. Oh, it's the voice. It's taken the mickey out of you. I mean, they can't recognize the voice when they hear it and see the mouth effect. The spellcaster tries to use the bag spell for something else, to put a skull ghost in there. I always have visions of putting the skull ghost in there and summoning Alita, and then all Alita can do is make the skull ghost noise. She wouldn't like that at all, would she? So it's a strange and distracting sequence with Alita's lost voice and the bag spell. And perhaps makes it rather less fun than it ought to be. Of course, a better answer to what wears a silly hat and looks ugly than a witch is something that Rosie and I worked out while watching a lot of TV drama about Henry VIII and his 6 wives and other members of the Tudor family. The real answer to what wears a silly hat and looks ugly is Anne of Cleves. Yes, indeed, the so-called Flanders mare wasn't really ugly at all. She just used to wear silly hats that made her look a bit weird. This is certainly the case in the 2007-10 series The Tudors, where Anne of Cleves was played by Joss Stone, who in most scenes is extremely attractive, but sometimes they put a silly hat on her, particularly when she's going to meet Jonathan Rhys-Meyers as Henry VIII, to make her look stupid. And she does wear silly hats in her real-life portraits and other adaptations of the story of the Tudors, Henry VIII. So that's the real answer there. What wears a silly hat and looks ugly? Who wears a silly hat and looks ugly? Anne of Cleves. And during this divining rod scene, I'll just take the opportunity to say, for anyone who's still interested, the one remaining spell that Hordris is going to give out at any point during the rest of Knightmare is the Splash spell to Ben's winning team in Series 6 for the final defeat of Lord Fear, and that is in an episode I've commentated on before. So really, thanks to that bag spell fiasco, this lot, Alex and the three silly twerps, must be on their very last chance. I'm sure Tim Child would like to get them through to level 3, showcase level 3 a bit more, have another look at Winteria, and indeed in the next quest, we start getting Isandra turning up in the spyglass, because it's the only way to give her more appearances in the series. Nobody else is getting to level 3. But at the same time, they've used all their we'll let them off then chances, haven't they, this lot? Any other little thing along the way, and surely that's an end to the quest. It has to be. Now, looking back, knowing that, analysing all the reasons behind it, it's very obvious why they're killed off on the causeway in just a moment. First, we notice that the level 2 blocker has moved. I kind of prefer the other room, really. The one they had it in before. This one feels to me kind of like a knockoff of the level 1 version of the blocker room. But the one that Richard and Ben had just had a bit of a different feel to it to go with the different looking blocker. I like that more. But yeah, the first time you watch this episode, on the causeway, Alex hasn't taken the step onto the next block, and the block he's on falls down, and that's the end of the quest. Unfathomable the first time round. You think, what is going on there? He hasn't even done it yet. There's never been any suggestion of blocks falling before the Dungeoneer gets off them before in this series on the causeways. I suppose there's a kind of implicit time limit all along. Time is of the essence, team, don't hang around. But really, if there's going to be some sort of time limit they're being penalised for, why haven't we been seeing it? Why aren't we seeing it now? Those are the sort of thoughts I was having when first seeing the death here with Alex. And I'm sure it's a big reason behind introducing the Fright Night timers on many of the causeways in Series 6. They keep changing their mind in Series 6 about whether they want a Fright Night timer on the level 1 causeway. I think they should be on all the causeways in Series 6 just to make things nice and clear. And of course they get faster as we go through the quest. But I do like those Fright Night timers as a development, because it's going to avoid situations like this, where you leave your audience feeling very confused, and perhaps even kind of cheated. Well, why did he die there? They didn't deserve that. Watch the video back a couple of times, this episode and the previous one, and you'll realise, oh yeah, they kind of did deserve that. They've screwed everything up, and they have a chance here to get Alex onto the right block, but they stop him and try to just straighten up a little bit, having hung around too long on that fire tile there. So really, that is the absolute last chance squeezed out, and they're penalised for it. I can see why that decision was taken. They have pushed their luck at least one step too far, not getting Alex to step onto the earth when they had the chance. But it remains one of the most unfathomable first-time watch deaths ever. Which is why it is a very notable Knightmare moment. Here we are with Chris, Paul, Keith and Kieran. This lot are so famous for their death and the few rooms leading up to their death in which Chris has been turned into a goblin by the change spell, which is something I so much don't want to talk about and get into anymore. It hurts my head and I don't like talking about it. But it does lead me to believe that Chris's team is one of the teams mentioned by David Lerner in his interview with Paul McIntosh in the first couple of issues of the iShield fanzine. David had a couple of stories there about some memorable moments with teams. He didn't name any names, very diplomatic of him. But I really do believe that Chris is the Dungeoneer that David Lerner mentioned as having come back to finish his filming the day after their death scene, black and blue, having been beaten up by his teammates the previous evening. They do get very frustrated with Chris, Paul, Keith and Kieran, and it's kind of Chris's fault that they end up in an untenable situation. You can see from this scene, by the way, how the Descender is very boring and pointless for the Dungeoneer, particularly a Dungeoneer like Chris who has very little idea what's going on anyway at any given time. But he has no idea what's going on here. You better tell Chris what's happening. We'll mess up the fun. Advisors try to describe what's going on. You're going down in a lift. We can see the scenery, but Chris still comes out with, "Where am I?" "You're just in a lift." They're already completely regretting coming on Knightmare with Chris, obviously. But yes, in level 2, Chris is the one who declines to take Motley's bauble, which, whatever the circumstances of actually getting through level 2 were supposed to be, or could have been, they obviously did need. And anytime you do see Motley's bauble, for goodness sake, pick it up. 3 times it's a clue object. Twice it's left behind. Dunstan's team are kind of let off leaving Motley's bauble behind, just like they let off everything. This team aren't let off. The only time anyone actually bothers taking Motley's bauble when they should is Leo in Series 3, the very first time it's there as a clue object. And here is Motley in the Crazed Heifer. Pickle's glad to see the Crazed Heifer again, reminding him favourably of Series 4, and this is some good use of Motley. It's a good place to see him. Although, unfortunately, like his appearance with Richard in episode 3 of this series, he's not really adding anything to the quest. He doesn't really have a role to play. He only plays a kind of active part in Ben's quest this series, being trapped in the stocks and giving them the password as a reward for getting Elita to release him. It's a shame to see Motley not being used well or hardly at all. There's stuff you can do with him. He can give out passwords and causeway codes and dragon fare just as well as anyone else. I'd just rather have Paul play Sylvester Hands most of the time. And as I've said before, I do think Motley and Sylvester Hands should both be given equal time in the spotlight. I've been trying to say for ages, haven't I? Chris is the one who rejects taking Motley's bauble. No, I don't think I should take that. I think I should take the pen. I mean the feather, which is utterly, utterly useless. So perhaps the root there of the downfall of this team is Chris taking the feather, refusing to take Motley's bauble, whatever else happens afterwards with turning into a goblin. They even kind of mess up at this early stage. you can see on the scroll there, it says, in a low place, take the high road. And they don't. In the next chamber we're going to see, the one with the stairs that makes Pickle so nervous when they go up the stairs with the eye shield sequence. For the only time in series 5 or 6, the low door is actually open, and the team do end up at the beginning of the next episode exiting through the low door. But surely, if they followed the scroll advice in that low place, they should have taken the high road, and they didn't. No one ever mentions it. But really, have they had their first strike against them there? Hardly deserves turning the Dungeoneer into a goblin later on just for that, does it? A strange old situation there. Very tempting to use that low door, as it is open for the only time, and rather an unappealing prospect to go up the stairs where those two goblins have just wandered past. You might run slap bang into them, but nevertheless, in a low place, take the high road, and they don't. They don't think of it. A strange old situation there, and I can't really get to grips with it in my mind at all, but then that pales into complete insignificance once the Chris Goblin situation comes along. So yeah, as I say, I reckon that Dungeoneer who came back to finish filming Black and Blue because his teammates had beaten him up was Chris from this team. I think they got him back to the hotel room in Norwich, divested him of his glasses and his orange t-shirt, and then two advisors held him, one by each arm, and the other advisor absolutely went to town on him between eye level and waist level with his fists to teach Chris a lesson there. And indeed, I'm sure they all swapped places, and all three advisors got their chance to give Chris an absolute pasting. And, well, who's to say he didn't deserve it? I mean, they seem to do all right, these advisors, particularly with Brother Mace's questions, forcing out Constantinople. It would be interesting to see how they might fare with a better, more responsive, more on the ball Dungeoneer. And certainly with a Dungeoneer who doesn't insist on taking the wrong objects, leaving behind one that is obviously correct. I used to find this ending rather amusing. The alarm, the opposition to track them, Lord Fear is frozen, Christopher, Pickles frightened us, the watchers, and we're backing out. Bah! We've gone. It's actually one of the stupidest, cringiest Series 5 endings you can find. But when I was 8, it did used to amuse me somewhat. But really, on the whole, with adult eyes, I do prefer the more sensible, atmospheric endings. That Tregard and Pickle deliberate comedy act we get in this series at the beginnings and ends of episodes. Yeah, Knightmare could have done without it, really. Thanks for listening to this episode commentary. Join me next time for the final entry in this third and final series of Knightmare commentaries, as I bite the bullet and talk about Knightmare's final episode, Series 8, Episode 10.